Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. After a while, I have with me someone really special. Of course, he's been coming to Dev Talks quite a bit, and he has given us a lot of insight into various different angles of the India-China relationship. Now, India-China relationship is not bilateral. There are a lot of little angles to it, and one of the biggest angles that the Chinese are very sensitive about is Tibet. And that's something we will discuss today. Sir, firstly, good evening. Welcome to the show and nice to see you back, sir.
Sorry?
Good evening. Welcome to the show and nice to see you back, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't. Thank you.
Not a problem. Sir, wanted to ask you, the Dalai Lama made a statement recently. And of course, it was a passing statement that all of us understand. But it was taken and interpreted, misinterpreted, and disinterpreted, if I may, in a lot of different angles. Uh, I wanted to basically ask you the biggest question. He said that the Chinese are in touch with me, they talk to me. What is happening here, sir? Why are the Chinese, if they are talking to the Dalai Lama or any of the representatives of his?
I can't comment on if the Dalai Lama is really in touch with the Chinese. He said this when he was taking the plane at the airport, the Dharamsala airport, going to Delhi. So he said, I have been in touch with the Chinese. So I don't know because I think apart from him and maybe one or two very close associate, nobody really knows. He also said that he reiterated that his policy is a middle path. Therefore, he doesn't think independence, but he thinks genuine autonomy for the Tibetans. Now, the official talks have stopped in 2010. There was a nine series of talks between 2002 and 2010, and I think they had reached a dead end because one of the issue, of course, in that very short interaction with the media in Gagal Airport, he didn't mention, but one of the issue that the Chinese insisted to say that Tibet has always been part of China. And this is not true. Just plainly, it's not true. So the dilemma has been very clear and strong on this point. Tibet has been invaded in 1950, 49, 50, 51, but earlier Tibet was an independent nation. And I think in one of my previous talk with you, developed the period between 1947 and 1950 and later 1962. Tibet was clearly at all the sign of an independence country. So the dilemma will never accept this contention of the Chinese government that Tibet has always been part of China. They may keep repeating this in their propaganda, but historically it's not a fact. And I've written 4 volumes on that, but apart from that, many other authors have written, and it's a well-known historical fact. So it means that practically to have discussion today with China is very difficult, and maybe some official from the Communist Party have been in touch with the Dalai Lama, or some people of the embassy. I don't know, but even if they have been in touch, it doesn't change the issue, because if they want genuine autonomy, it means very long, protracted negotiation. Now, if you compare what is happening on Pangong Tso, on the lake in Ladakh, where India and China, both the army, the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, and the Indian Army, had 17 rounds of talks, and out of which, since 3 years, no, because the confrontation started in May of 2020, some progress has been made on three areas, but in two areas totally blocked, despite the fact that the new foreign minister of China, Wang Yi, was previously also, because in the meantime their foreign minister disappeared. I think it's one of the only country in the world with North Korea where the foreign minister can disappear and nobody says anything. Everything goes on like usual. Anyway, Mr. Wang Yi met Mr. Ajit Doval, India's NSA, and of course he was arguing that we should go on with our relation and forget Ladakh for some time. But I don't think the army and as well as the government is ready to forget Depsang or Demchok. So all this to say that India has 60 or 70,000 troops on the border. Dalai Lama has nothing. So that makes a very big difference in negotiating with China. And other points that why China gave up something on the fingers area in Ladakh, just because the Tibetan troops, actually the Tibetan troops working with the government of India, with the Indian army, with the cabinet secretariat, had taken that Kailash range one night of the end of August 1920, and India had a bargaining chip to negotiate with China. My point again is that Tibet, I'm speaking of His Holiness Dalai Lama, the Central Tibetan Administration in Dharamsala, has very little concrete bargaining chip to negotiate today with China. And the other issue is if China would give something, some sort of autonomy, they will not give because the Communist Party is taking more and more hold in Tibet. But they would have to give the same thing to the Uyghur in Turkestan, Eastern Turkestan, that we call Xinjiang today. So that would have also implication for the People's Republic of China. So I don't think they will give anything right now. And the Dalai Lama repeats that he wants genuine autonomy. It would have to be seen also what it means for the Indian border. So, because if Dalai Lama returns with genuine autonomy, he had made it clear that foreign affairs and defense would remain with China. So India would have the same problem, little bit more complicated on the border with China from Ladakh to Arunachal. So that is an issue that you started speaking about tripartite, that there is no two party in the issue, there is three party. And this we should never forget because since 1914, in the Shemla Convention, where the Chinese representative, the Tibetan plenipotentiary, and Sir Henry McMahon representing British India, he was foreign secretary, discussed together at the same level. So this issue can be solved only with India's participation. One of the greatest blunder of the government in 1950s is to have negotiated the Panchil agreement just between China and Delhi and Beijing, and without involving at all the Dalai Lama, because after all, it's their country, it's their border, and everyone knows that when we had another neighbor till 1950-51, there was not a single policeman on the entire Arunachal or Ladakh boundary. So that is the opposite today. So, but this issue really also involves India. You can't brush it aside. It cannot be just a negotiation between the Dalai Lama's representative and China because it involves the border. This is my view. I think many people will not share my views, especially in Dharamsala, but these are my views.
Absolutely, sir. It's 100% in agreement. What I wanted to also ask you next is that after 22 years, last year we saw Xi Jinping actually stepping foot into Tibet. That's one of the first times a leader of the Chinese Communist Party is actually, at that level has actually visited Tibet. Now, what that can be taken as two things. One, uh, he is involved in Tibet, or two, he feels a certain threat and he went there to streamline and stabilize it. How do you look at it, sir?
I think for both. He is involved in Tibet because his father was deeply involved. Uh, Xi Jinping was one of the right-hand men of Deng Xiaoping, and he was the political commissar of the first field army who entered in Tibet in 1950 from the north, from Qinghai. There was two main, they came from two directions, one from Sichuan, the 18th Army, and the first field army from the north, from Qinghai. So Xi Jinping's father was involved. Xi Jinping's father was very much involved with the previous Panchen Lama, the 10th Panchen Lama, and it is said that Xi Jinping's father had still a watch before passing away in the 80s, that he had still a watch which was given to him by the Dalai Lama in 1954 in Beijing. So that, there's a connection, but at the same time, Xi Jinping is extremely nervous about the border areas, the what they call the minorities area, meaning the Xinjiang, the Uyghur in Xinjiang, and the Tibetan in Tibet, and in some ways also the Mongols in Inner Mongolia. So his visit 2 years back, I think, was for this purpose. And 2 days back, Wang Huning, who is the number four, who is the ideologue of the party, who is a member of the standing committee of the Politburo, who is a very, very powerful person, visited Tibet. I would say secretly, because China never announced the visit. Once the leader has returned to Beijing, they will say that leader has been there. And of course, because Xi Jinping visited Sichuan last week, they didn't want to do any shade to the emperor. So the visit of Wang Huning was not hardly
Announced.
mentioned in the
Mm.
Chinese press, but I've not seen it anywhere in the English media. So it means that these leaders are very following very closely from what is happening in Tibet. But what is happening in Tibet is more and more restriction, particularly for the religion. And
Hmm.
they have, it's not only Buddhism, it's also Islam and Catholicism. They want to sinicize the religion. So sinicize means that the religion comes under the Communist Party and they follow the red flag. So in practically, what does it mean that Tibetan Buddhism is sinicized? It's better not to think about it too much, but this is no more Tibetan Buddhism, because Tibetan Buddhism comes from India, from Nalanda. It's a Nalanda tradition. So if you put a Tibetan Buddhism with Chinese characteristic, with communist characteristic, it's no more the Tibetan Buddhism. But it's really their first objective there, apart, of course, from the developing the infrastructure and developing the borders area, doing new roads and new railway lines, particularly between Sichuan and Lhasa. So
Hmm.
that's why Wang Huning and went last week, and Xi Jinping went 2 years back.
So, sir, the Rand Corporation, and you mentioned more amount of kind of repression towards the Tibetan people. The Rand Corporation recently put out a study which did a survey of the night lights, especially of the detention camps within Tibet. Detention camps, the jails, and the holding cells or the high security zones and stuff like that. And they showcase a map which shows that those detention camps, the lighting has increased. That means the camps have actually expanded. Is Tibet going down the Xinjiang or the East Turkestan way, sir? Is the same model being applied into Tibet as well?
I think maybe it's the other way around. Xinjiang has gone the way Tibetan had been going, and actually the person, the official who was the the boss in Tibet, the party secretary for the Tibetan Autonomous Region, in 2016, shifted to Xinjiang and applied the same methods that he had applied in Tibet in Xinjiang. But Xinjiang came under the limelight of the media. Tibet, very few people speak about it. And I think the repression is much more organized. In 2008, there were riots for a couple of months, mainly in Western Tibet, but they have learned from the unrest. Like they have learned, the Communist Party is a fast learner. They have
Hmm.
learned, for example, in Ladakh, after the confrontation, the first few months, they had a lot of logistic issues, including the oxygen that their troops, the Chinese troop, suffered a great deal, while the Ladakh scouts or the Tibetan troops or even the Indian troops in general are more acclimatized and more trained for that. But they learn very fast. Now you don't see any article in the Chinese media about our oxygen. So they learn for everything. So they adapt and so regarding Tibet, uh, this RAND report, uh, it's just an interpretation, but it's probably true that there's more detention. But the difficulty is how to know about it. There's no, you can't phone to Tibet, you can't send photos. I mean, people from inside Tibet. And that is the main. They have controlled much more all the communications and all the social media and everything. It's so sophisticated, and if something that they don't want, it will be removed from the social media in a few seconds. Can you imagine that when the Mr. Xing Hang, the Minister of External Affairs of China, disappeared 1 month ago? Everything was removed. His name
Yeah.
from everywhere on the website and all the different websites of the party and the government, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. All his name, everything he has done, just removed. So in Tibet, it's much worse in many ways. So it's very difficult to get information. That's why RAND Corporation had to study this satellite imagery with the light.
I
That
mean, yeah, it's amazing that something like this can happen in today's day and age. I want to ask you about the factor that it's been now, they did what they did in Tibet in 1950s. It's now 70 plus years that the Chinese Communist Party has been sitting there in Tibet. Uh, isn't this a complete failure that you've not been able to assimilate a population within yourself? Uh, in more than 75 years, you've not been able to, you know, don't they have a corrective system where they've realized, okay, this is not working, let me change my strategy? Have they changed their strategy in terms of handling Tibet? Because I've only read about a very heavy handed approach right from the beginning.
apparently I was saying they are fast learner, but that lesson they have not learned because they still speak about the liberation of Tibet,
Yeah.
and every few months there are article in their media about the liberation of Tibet and how the Tibetans are much better under China. They are better in one way materially. It's true that like the entire China, the Chinese people as well as the Tibetan people are better off. Their life is better. They earn more, and they can travel. At least the Chinese Han, they can travel. 150 million of Chinese Han before COVID were going abroad and visiting other areas. No? So some Tibetan are better off, but there's no freedom. No, they can't. Something very telling that these small villages that they have built along the border, this Xiaokong village, this so-called moderately well-off village. Xiaokong in China means moderately well-off village. on the border. They don't have any prayer flags. They don't have any gompa. They don't have any shirten, stupa. So you just compare with Ladakh, or you compare with Tawang area, or Walong area in Loit sector in Arunachal, or Sikkim, or Kinnaur. And you see that here in India, people have the freedom. Maybe there's a very lot of villages which have been deserted by the people. Government has now taken some measure and trying to do this vibrant village. It's just starting that scheme, but at least they have the freedom to worship whatever they want, no? And that is not the case. When you see the monastery, it's just they keep repeating about the follow the party, follow the red flag, follow the party. But is it Tibetan Buddhism? And another sign, I think very crucial sign. You speak of 70 years, 1950, 51, 72 years. Now the party boss, the first secretary of the party in the Tibetan Autonomous Region, has never been a Tibetan. It has always been a Han Chinese.
Wow.
If you look at the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, the Tibet Military District, few Tibetans have become general, but they have never been the commanding. They are not in operational post. They never send a Tibetan on the border, senior Tibetan. So the commanders as well as the political commissar, they have always this dual post in the Chinese army, one commander and one political commissar who are the same rank. Both are Han. And when they spoke of having Tibetan army and doing like the Special Frontier Force who took the Kailash range in 2020, they are unable. They're unable because they can have a few Tibetans. We will help them they will get a good salary and everything. They will help them for Reiki, or they will help them for doing other work, but not as a combatant force. They can't because they can't trust them. They don't trust the Tibetan.
Now that's very
Maybe they're right
telling.
not to trust the Tibetan, but
That's very telling, sir, I must say, because that really tells you uh, the assimilation factor. And I haven't seen, as a matter of fact, now that you bring this up, in India, you have a successful businessman from all over the country. Even every part of the country, there's a name of a successful businessman who's there. I haven't seen a Tibetan successful business tycoon, or like a Jack Ma or somebody like that, or even a smaller version of somebody like that who's come up into the world forum. I mean, that's if somebody does, that's going to be a big propaganda victory for the Chinese. See, here's a Tibetan who's doing so well for himself. But
there's one girl who won um, gold medal in the Olympics in the
ah,
walk, 20-kilometer
hmm,
walk, I think.
hmm.
One Tibetan girl, but that's not much. And
Yeah, I mean, it just tells you. So I want to now go into a factor that which a lot of Indians really wonder about. What is it that Tibet really wants? I mean, do they want independence? Do they want autonomy? But as human beings, of course, when we talk about autonomy, it has to be true autonomy. It can't be the Chinese characteristics autonomy or Xi Jinping thought autonomy. It's not possible. And I'm sure the Tibetans know that. Now, unofficially speaking, sir, what do they want? I mean, officially, of course, their line is well known. We don't want to separate and this and that, because they know the reprimands would be on the Tibetan people. But what is it that the Tibetan people outside Tibet want?
I think you should ask also inside Tibet, because in outside Tibet, maybe 150 Tibetans now.
So,
Many have migrated to the west, and only 65, 70 in India. rest is in the West, in America or in Europe. That is one, but there's also 6 million Tibetan in Tibet. So we should also, of course, it's very difficult to know what they want. And they can't express themselves, they can't communicate. And if uh, you were mentioning some people achieving something in the society as an author, as a writer, as a painter, but each time this one Tibetan who achieves something, his position become very tricky, and many of them end up in jail because they will think, oh, you're promoting too much Tibetan language or too much Tibetan culture, and not enough the party rules and things like that. So what the Tibetan want, I can't answer because I think each Tibetan has his own um, aspiration. I think there is different expression inside a Tibetan and outside a Tibetan. Outside,
Hmm.
he will say, for the middle path, which is in the future, maybe it will happen. As I say, I don't see it happening immediately. Inside them, most of the people I know, I think they would like to be independent because they know that they have till 1950 for century, 2, 3 millennia, Tibet has been independent. So inside, I think they want independence. And but no, I mean, today Dalai Lama has chosen that part of the middle part because probably he saw that there was no possibility of independence. But inside, I think the Tibetan want independence because if you ask them, if you follow the middle path, the foreign affair as well as defense is under China. Therefore, you'll be a Chinese citizen. You'll have a Chinese passport. You want a Chinese passport? Everyone say no. Most of the people will say no, but because genuine autonomy, this is very tricky because you see in 1951 there was a 17 points agreement. The Tibetans were forced to sign that agreement, but in the agreement itself, they the Dalai Lama could keep his role, the Panchen Lama could keep his role in the Tibetan society. And in many ways, it's like the genuine autonomy that is today asked. But China never respected the treaty. So now the question is, suppose tomorrow there is an agreement between Beijing and Dharamsala. It may not happen, but suppose what is the guarantee
Yeah.
that China will follows what he has signed, because we have seen with India. If you look at the 1993, 96, 2005, 2010 border agreement, China has not respected its word. That is the main issue that, for example, Dr. Jaishankar, the foreign minister of India, is keep hammering that if you sign something, same thing for 1954 for the Panchil. If China signs something, very often they change the, the post. So there is no guarantee that even if
Hmm.
the Tibetan tomorrow there is an agreement that China will not change. As long as China is the most powerful or the second most powerful nation in the world, uh, it's very difficult to deal with them.
I think honestly, sir, I'd add a little bit to what you just said. As long as China is the most powerful nation, second most powerful nation in the world, fair enough. But I think the Chinese are the most arrogant nation in the world, who's refusing to understand anybody else's sensitivities. But when they deal with India, they expect us to understand their sensitivity with regards to Tibet. Now, this is very interesting to me, and you mentioned some time ago, and I'll ask you this as a last question, that when Wongi and Ajit Doval met, he said, "Keep the border situation away, and let's do commerce and everything like that." This is something that they've been saying since the Bandung conference in 1955. Let Don't let our bilateral issues, the local issues as they call it, become a part of the greater strategic world. They are repeating themselves, so they don't take into consideration anybody's sensitivities. How do you deal with a nation like this?
I think I don't fully agree with you. I would not put it entirely on the Chinese people, because the other side you have Taiwan, and you can deal with Taiwan. You can discuss with Taiwan. They
Fair
are
enough.
Chinese people. So I would put
CCP.
it on the regime.
CCP.
The Communist Party
Yeah.
is in their genes that they have no respect for others, and that is a tragedy that in 1950 that Sardar Patel, just 1 month before he passed away, he wrote very long letter to Nehru pointing out that if these people come on our border, we are going to have problem, and he detailed it, very detailed it. But Nehru said, no, we have to be friends, we have to be Indi, Chini, bye bye, and this and that. But that particular regime, which is same than Mao Zedong from 1949 till today, Xi Jinping is same than Mao Zedong. Is not very much different in his policy, in his approach internally. Though externally, he preaches peace, world peace, and sharing, and all this. But internally, there's no difference with Mao Zedong. So, though the Chinese people, as well as the Tibetans, are better off materially, the party you can't trust, because they want their own, they have their own ideology, and they will push it through. So I think Mr. Doval or Dr. Jaishankar is absolutely right to say no. You have taken, you have entered in our territory in Depsang and Demchok. You go back, and after that we will discuss the other issue. But in the meantime, the business is flourishing also. That is another issue that.
Hmm. Well, that is economics, sir. Sir, I must say this is quite a distinction from the narrative. You've actually given us a realistic picture, which I think a lot of the media misses out. I miss your blog. As a matter of fact, I was telling you offline as well that you must write, because people like us need to learn from what your experience is. And it is very important that people see the reality rather than see the whole narrative that is built up. This whole comment from the Dalai Lama was so badly portrayed in the Indian media, and I was quite upset about it. I said, one must know the reality before you say anything. Oh, they don't want this, they don't want that. Now, this is a very realistic picture that you've told me, and I'm grateful to you. I know you've taken out time just a day before your travel. I'm always grateful that you agreed and speak with me, sir, and I'm looking forward to many such conversations. Till then, sir, Jai Hind.